And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live from the Worldwide Coalition headquarters here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. I am Pat Ford, your host for this evening's festivities. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us, where our new section, Civil Liberty News, brought you this week story after story on the, shall we say, the passive-aggressive nature of the leadership of the Rhode Island Democratic Party, amongst others. We also cover the American Civil Liberties Union, the ongoing adventures of Invenergy, issues dedicated to bring you an alternative perspective on the news directly from the source of the news. As always, I think there's a show we're going to do soon on suburban sprawl. We're running a few minutes late. Imagine living in Providence and the entire northern part of the state returns from Massachusetts, where it goes to work every day. Commuter waiting times now, driving into the city, are approaching a half hour for a 3 or 4 mile drive. Is that any way to live? It's certainly been a challenge for us the last few weeks, to where we're even contemplating formally starting the show a little bit later. Yikes. Well, let's get right down to it. I have been privileged over a number of years now in the Coalition to host tonight's guest. I consider him a friend, a political ally, despite the fact that we span what some would say a political gulf. It helps when you're just friends, right? It certainly does.
There is no gulf.
You know, he has in effect become one of the poster children, if you will, for bringing ideas into our studio here and creating an intelligent, reasoned, open forum for discussion. And some of these issues, in fact, are things like suburban sprawl, intelligent energy use, what are the futures of Rhode Island cities. Just on several weeks ago, where we did, I guess, the first of a couple of victory laps, resolving, of course, the Invenergy crisis. Well, I'll let him deliver the news, but another stamp came down, well, I wouldn't call it a nail in the coffin, I would say shoveling dirt on that coffin at this point, of the now hopefully permanently failed gas-fired power plant that would have been set in the pristine woods surrounding the greater metropolis that we know as Burrillville and Pasco. Paul Roselli, welcome back to the Coalition.
Thanks, Pat.
And again, congratulations on yet another milestone. This one even had a big seal on it.
It did, big gold seal on it.
Big official seal.
With 3 colorful signatures from 3 very important people. Yeah, November 5th, a day I think 10 to 15 years from now we'll look back and say that was the day, that was the official start of the end of production of electricity by fossil fuels.
Sort of our own Rhode Island Guy Fawkes Day, huh?
I think so.
Okay.
I really do think so.
Absolutely. So where are we in the process now?
Sure.
When last we spoke, really the beginning, or even the middle of the end, right, what's evolved over the last month or so to get us to this point, and where are we going now?
Sure, and I think it's important to give kind of an elevator overview of what transpired since August 1st, 2015, when our governor of the state of Rhode Island told the folks from Chicago that, and I know this quote word for word, that we will do everything we can to make sure you're successful here. That was the start of a long ordeal, an over 4-year ordeal from that moment, not only for the folks in the northwest corner of Rhode Island, but for the entire state and the entire region. Because remember, the electric grid is not just built around telephone poles in Rhode Island. We get electricity from all over, from New York, from the rest of New England. That's called ISO New England. ISO is the independent service operator. They're the folks who maintain and turn those power plants on and off in order to keep the lights on. In order to keep the lights on the studio, in order to keep the Facebook posts going to the servers. So that's when it all started. It ended, and truly it ended, on November 5th, 2019. Invenergy filed their application way back in November of 2015, And here we are, 4 years later, on November 5th, shy of maybe 14 days, that Invenergy is now told to pack their bags and go home. But there's something that's incredibly significant and key to the future of fossil fuel production of electricity, key to the grid. It's also going to be one of the points that will propel something like the Rhode Island Progressive Democrats and their wish to make the city of Cranston a model for energy independence. And that was one key thing that happened during the 4 years. Mm-hmm. If you asked me, and I think you did ask me 4 years ago when we started all this, if the Energy Facility Siting Board was likely to approve this power plant based on all of the criteria that was available to them, all the guide plans, all of the opinions that were required, all of the state agencies, the approval and support of the governor and a lot of other state leaders, the labor unions, and on and on and on. If you were to ask me way back in November when this thing was filed, and I did, I've told a lot of people, I said, this is a done deal. We're lost here. We don't have the support. Burrillville, the Northwest Territories are exactly that, far away. Most people don't even know how to spell the word Burrillville, let alone pronounce it. No reflection on the rest of the state. However, that's the way it is sometimes. So way back then, we knew we needed a bigger voice, and over those 4 years, we got it. Not only did we get a bigger voice, but I think we changed the mindset of many of the state agencies, certainly the Department of Health, certainly the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, and also the Department of Public Utilities and Carriers. That one opinion was requested way back in the early 2016s, early 2016 by the Energy Facility Siting Board. They rendered an opinion. You may remember that famous picture of there was one commissioner member, because the other two had to recuse themselves, one commissioner member at a public hearing, Mr. DeSimone, who sat there and took public testimony at a public hearing to find out what was the state of mind of the people who were there. He wrote up a report highly favorable of the Invenergy power plant, talking about State Guide Plan 2035, how this State Guide Plan almost mandated that we needed to look well beyond near a year or two down the road when it came to energy need and electricity production, that they looked down a 20-year horizon. If we fast forward to the early part of late 2018, 2019, there was a difference of opinion. The Energy Facility Siting Board, and I know we talked about this as well, Pat, that they came back and said that the information on that opinion from the DPUC is stale. They even say in their report that the opinion from the Department of Public Utilities and Commissions was stale because it was 3 years old. Imagine, 3 years old. I'm wearing shoes that are at least 3 years old. But for some reason, they came back and said that information was stale. And they were absolutely right. Now I'm going to fast forward because I know you're going to have some questions about, so what does this all mean? So fast forward to the written order. It's called Written Order 140. You can find it on the Energy Facility Siting Board website. Just look for Invenergy or look for concluded dockets, and you'll see something that's called Order 140. And if you go to page 16 or 18, I think it's one of those, if you go to one of those pages, you'll see a brief discussion of that energy guide plan called 2035. And in it, here's what they said. I'm going to read part of it because this is pretty amazing. This is unbelievable in terms of how the Energy Facility Siting Board has evolved since the application of Invenergy's proposed power plant in the middle of the woods in the northwest corner of Rhode Island. Here's what they said. The planning advisory opinion goes on to explain that the energy plan sets a bold, long-term vision that clearly contemplates a concerted transition to an energy system that incorporates more energy efficiency, renewable energy, and alternative fuels. They go on to say that the energy plan, this is energy plan or Energy 2035, that's the state guide plan for how we make electricity, how we get electricity into your homes. They say the energy plan emphasizes the need for a balanced approach that meets the immediate and short-term needs of the energy system while also setting the state on a long-term path towards energy system transformation. That key word, transformation, and here's what they concluded that paragraph by saying. They said fossil fuel power plants do not figure prominently in that transformation. Do you all hear that? Anybody out there who's holding a sign or running up and down the street saying the end of fossil fuels, you're all set. You got the state now, you got the Energy Facility Siting Board to agree with you that and I'll read this last statement again. Fossil fuel plants do not figure prominently in that transformation. So here we are. Now, we can look at this and say, certainly it's the demise of Invenergy. Invenergy has 10 days in order to appeal this decision, this Order 140. They can go to the Superior Court in the state of Rhode Island, plunk down a whole bunch of money, write up a whole bunch of briefings and files in terms of how to fight against this report. But the bottom line is they don't have a chance. They don't have a chance because of that last line. Fossil fuel power plants do not figure prominently in that transformation. So Invenergy is out of the picture, and we can close the window, close the door, close whatever it is you want to close.
Take a moment to gloat, though.
Yeah.
Gloating is in order.
But only a moment, because the future is really bright, and this is a really hopeful sign that we've got a state agency. Granted, it's not perfect, and there are many out there who are trying to correct what we think or modify what we think is an imperfect process. But beside that, today, on November 5th, or a few days ago, on November 5th, 2019, the end of fossil fuels for the production of electricity is not only in sight, it's happening right now.
It's interesting because about a year or so into this, after we had met, we both cited a report that was replicated in Scientific American that pointed out, with a big smile, that for the first time, really in history, that alternative energy plants, alternative energy production, had taken over the lion's share, if you will, the majority of new power plant production.
Right, and that's still true today. As of today, even if you count the facility at Cape Cod, the facility in Oxford, Connecticut, and the one that was approved in Killingly, Connecticut, if you take those out of the equation, only very briefly, solar and wind, solar installation has actually never been better, never been cheaper, and is now cheaper than methane gas for the production of electricity. The procurement, and it's only the procurement, Rhode Island still has the only offshore wind electricity production facility in the United States. But the procurement of more far exceeds what is on the books for any new fossil fuel power plants in New England.
Now, just as a quick aside, what happened to Killingly?
Yeah.
What did you folks do right, and
Yeah.
I don't want to say what went wrong in Killingly?
Well, we can look back on Killingly, and Killingly was actually used as a model and as a hopeful sign for what we hoped would eventually happen with the Invenergy facility. At the time, the Connecticut Siting Council decided not to approve the Killingly power plant because they didn't have a contract with ISO New England to sell the electricity that the plant was going to produce back into the grid. The production company, NTE, refiled, and before they refiled to the Connecticut Siting Council, they got what's called a CSO. They got a contract to sell their electricity to the grid. And so from what we read and heard, the Connecticut Siting Council felt that they denied it because they denied it initially because they didn't have what's called a CSO, capacity supply obligation, or a contract to sell the electricity. This time they did, so they couldn't deny it based on that. So they granted a permit. So we did a bunch of things right the first time by at least watching this. Unfortunately, there wasn't too much opposition. The opposition is now being built up, even though the plant has been given a permit. There seems to be a groundswell of both grassroots and legislature opposition to that Killingly power plant, and we'll see what happens. There are some who think that because of what they bid to get that contract, in other words, NTE had to actually bid on supplying electricity at a certain rate. They bid at such a low price that there are many believe that that power plant will never be built because it's just not cost effective. They will never make back their money. Maybe in 100, 30 or 40 years, they might make back their money, maybe even longer. But in the short term, for an investor to actually invest money to build that power plant, there are many who think that'll never be built.
And that actually speaks to the model that was developed, in a sense, on the fly in Burrillville, because
correct.
It was a multi-pronged attack. You incorporated science,
right?
Science at its best. You incorporated political pressure,
right?
Grassroots pressure. You were able to band together a group of activists from a variety of organizations, some new, some a century old, and that created really the perfect. You refined it down to a science almost, with a lot of art, and how to take on big energy.
Right. If the playbook is ever written, it'll all start with a grassroots group of people who decided that they did not want to sell their water, no matter if it was good water or bad water, to a fossil fuel electricity production facility. And they did not want to do that. We have to thank the people in Pascoag, because if they did not create such an uproar with the Pascoag Utility District and asking them to rescind their letter of intent, that would have given Invenergy a close, reliable, and cheap water supply, we would be here talking about something else. That led all of us, and I mean all of us, all the environmental groups, the Conservation Law Foundation, many within local government, in other words, the town council, local reps at the time, and then some state leaders, and all of us, all the nonprofit and grassroots folks, to actually get on board and saying that again, this is something that we can fight. So it's my belief that this is probably one of the first times in a long time that the grassroots folks have won out.
Have we heard from our buddy in Johnson, Mayor Joe?
We did. He was disappointed when the announcement came out way back in June, as many state leaders, local leaders were. The governor was disappointed. Many of the unions were disappointed. I don't know if anybody's tried to hire a plumber lately or an electrician. You know that it's almost impossible to get one there anytime soon. I don't know if they're hurting or if they're just going elsewhere to get work, but there's a lot of work out there. There's also a lot of work in the construction industry. We are going to spend a whole bunch of billions of dollars recreating and revamping our school system. So over the next few years, there'll be a lot of work there. If we can get the federal government off our backs, and if we can get the fishermen on board, and I pray to God and hope that the fishermen realize that we're all in this together, that their livelihood is also our livelihood, and without clean energy, they can't survive because of environmental issues. Without a clean ocean, without a safe harbors, without all of those things, we just don't have an economy. But if we can get all that going, then there'll be jobs for the construction industry, particularly the offshore construction folks, both in engineering, the deep water types of construction, many tons of steel and cable and everything else that'll have to be supplied. So if we can just get the federal government, and my suggestion is, I mentioned this a few days ago, from Maine all the way down to the Carolinas, there's a lot of Republican governors there. I want you all band together, write the EPA and the Department of the Defense now, and ask them to please set aside some of their concerns, and let's get this offshore wind project up and running.
Excellent. Excellent.
So that's where we are. And I truly feel that 10 to 15 years from now, we'll look back on this day, when this report was written, and say that was the beginning. That was the start of the end of fossil fuels. I don't believe that from here on out we will ever see another one of these projects again coming before the Energy Facility Siting Board.
Excellent. Congratulations. And a snapshot. Every time we visit, there's ongoing progress with reinventing the siting board. Right. Where does that stand right now going into the legislature?
Sure. Well, you know, and many of your viewers know that over the years we've attempted a bunch of iterations on moving the energy board to mimic or to look like many of the other siting boards within the New England states. Our neighbors to the west in the Commonwealth of the Nutmeg State of Connecticut, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to our north and east and west. They have bigger boards, more robust transparency, a more robust type of process, a shorter time frame. They expand and contract the board depending on the complexity of the job, the complexity of the application. And they bring in other experts almost immediately. So some of the proposals that are out there, and there are plenty, and most of these have been public for at least 2 or 3 years, is an expansion of the existing Energy Facility Siting Board, or at the very least to give authorization to the chair to expand or contract the members of the board depending on the complexity of the job. Mm-hmm. Certainly, most of them, most of the what are called dockets, most of the projects that appear before the Energy Facility Siting Board are wire projects, moving strands of wire, moving cable, increasing cable, moving telephone poles, increasing the capacity of some of the electric lines that are already out there, putting some of it underground, reinforcing it. And most of those are very short projects, less than a mile in length. They may upset the local community, but it's temporary on the outset to a few weeks to maybe a few months. Certainly not a 4-year project like this has done. Certainly not a 2-year to almost 3 years of construction. But a lot of these are what many of us calling minor projects. Minor in the sense that they come in, they change a few wires, a few telephone poles, put something underground, increase the capacity, and then they're out, they're gone. To give authorization to the chair to expand or contract the board would make sense, because we are going to see a lot more wires and upgrading of transformers, upgrading of substations, which with all of the renewable wind projects and wind farms coming out, whether they be rooftop, ground-mounted, canopy-mounted, whatever they are. So we're going to see a lot more of those. And many of us in the nonprofit world, the environmental community, and the energy market feel that to give National Grid that the benefit of the doubt, and also to expedite some of those projects. That's something the Energy Facilities Siting Board should have the authority to either take on and quickly go through the docket, or not take on at all. So that's one big change. The other big change, and this has certainly been public over the last 2 or 3 years, because we've seen a lot of deforestation, a lot of clear cutting of forests. And there's a movement of having the Energy Facilities Siting Board mimic some of the other boards, Connecticut and Massachusetts particularly, because in those states, when it comes to any type of clear cutting, that immediately goes to the Energy Facilities Siting Board of their respective states. Not so much of the project, but in terms of the environmental impact. So what we're looking at is more of a watershed approach rather than a project-by-project approach. What does that clear cutting look like, or in reference to the rest of the area? Is it part of a contiguous forest that spans thousands of acres? Is this clear cutting a flyway, or a place where water infiltrates into an aquifer or watershed, or a river or stream? Will there be erosion that takes place because of a clear cutting? Is agricultural land will be lost at least for the next 20 or 30 years? So there are many of us throughout Rhode Island are hoping that a place like the Energy Facilities Siting Board would be the one-stop place for nearly all ground-mounted clear-cutting of forest projects, solar projects, and wind projects in the state of Rhode Island. And then they can decide, they have the authorization to look at it and or expand the board with a group of foresters, people in the forest community, the nonprofits, commercial folks, state agencies who would look at all these projects and determine their fate, would help determine their fate. So that's what we're hoping. Those are the key differences that we hope to. And again, many of these have been publicly announced over the last 2 or 3 years. Connecticut certainly has been doing this for the last 2 or 3 years in the hopes of reducing or eliminating clear cutting of forest. So too Massachusetts. Yes, there is a market incentive, and we want the market or the incentives to go higher for things like solar canopies or solar projects on landfills or impervious surfaces or brownfields, and have disincentives, essentially not as much money when it comes to projects that involve clear cutting of forests. So that's ongoing. It's been ongoing for almost 2 years now, 2.5 years. We hope that this coming legislative session, that there'll be something that we can push before the legislature and get approved, because I think that's where we need to be. This is good. The Order 140 is good in terms of eliminating fossil fuel power plants. But now let's get to that next level, and that next level is dealing with clear cutting of forests for installation of solar arrays.
Right, and I think we missed a great opportunity in the state to get stakeholders together and visit how we were going to redefine ground-based transportation through the state in terms of the 610 corridor. We consistently miss opportunities to come up with a vision, a collaborative vision, not just one impacted by the state and then pushed downhill, but a collaborative vision between people who have property rights and are owners. Time and time again, because of political expediency and the desire to meet the ever-growing needs of, well, let's be blunt, the unions that supported Gina Raimondo in this past election. When in fact, if it's time invested before the next crisis du jour, as opposed to this sort of political whack-a-mole that we play in Rhode Island, it would be welcome. So a studied approach so that we can avoid on our own small scale what's going on in California right now.
Sure.
The time to do it is now.
Right.
Before continued changes in climate ultimately impact on an even greater level our environment, and probably a lot of that has to do with obviously seacoast. because in our case, it's probably not going to be fire issues, it's going to be coastal issues.
That's correct.
And that's the time to have that conversation is now, as opposed to, well, what we usually do around here.
Yeah, and sea coasts, coastlines certainly will be impacted, but probably the more immediate concern is water quality. And when you start diminishing forest quality or the health of the forest, you immediately impact water. And without water, there's not only no life, but there's no economy. We can look all around the world for when the natural resources implode or diminish or just cease to exist, and the economy is non-existent. And we don't want that in Rhode Island. And you know, you really have to feel for the unions, and I have over these last few years. The carpenters union, the construction union, all those folks who depend on either new or modified types of buildings or reconstruction or construction. And you're absolutely right. They're out there and they're doing their best. The 610 corridor, the Fane Tower, are good examples of when popular thought, popular input fails, and we need to get back to doing exactly what we did with this project, with this Invenergy project, looking at the grassroots, looking at those folks, getting a bigger voice statewide was the key to making sure that every state agency, every politician, everybody in Rhode Island and elsewhere too, understood the impact, the severity of this project. And we won on so many different levels and will continue to win. But we've got to, you're absolutely right, we've got to have a vision that precludes that the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we have a healthy community and a healthy environment. Those are the first two. Without either one of these, through whatever optimal healthcare system you want to think of, but without a healthy population and without a healthy environment, which includes a healthy water supply, we don't have anything. We don't have a Rhode Island, and we certainly learned that over these last 4 years, and it's something that we'll continue to work on for the next 4 years and beyond. So yeah.
Well, I'm going to issue a challenge to you.
Yeah.
You know, what I've tried to do in the past, and sometimes political schedules in terms of people running for office have interfered with it, was create opportunities for people to take an hour or two at time, show time, and essentially create their own show within the show. I think it's an important conversation to have when you look at, I'll call it, on one hand, political expediency, and number two, a property rights responsible, collaborative approach to getting together and defining what the future of our cities, our exurbs, and as importantly as you put it, our coastal and our forests look like in this state. One that, again, respects property rights of the individual owners, but at the same time acknowledges that you can have a master plan like you did in Providence. There's a whole other conversation. And someone like Fane could come in and just literally toss a political hand grenade in it, and then built under the excuse, and again, I come from a union family. My goal is that someday the unions in this state find ample opportunity for income, jobs, and prosperity in the private sector, as opposed to routinely having to look towards stadiums, casinos, shopping centers, state-sponsored, state-subsidized office towers for their growth.
Sure.
And I think there's a happy medium in there that we can all find working together.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put that challenge together for you.
Right.
Let's sometime in the very near future bring in a couple people and have a conversation about how we start that process. And I think
Sounds good.
There's going to be a significant leadership change in the state over the next year or two on a couple of levels. My next guest, we're going to talk about how that leadership change is probably going to take place very quickly at the General Assembly. Yeah. But I'll put that out to you, my friend.
All right, sounds good. I'll be there. I'll take the challenge on, you bet.
God bless.
All right, thanks so much, Pat.
Paul Roselli,
yeah,
joining the coalition again. And again, congratulations to the folks in Burrillville. You get to resume your lives now.
For a while.
I think you guys are in pretty good shape. Yeah. We're going to take a quick break right now. Anyone who's followed the news over the last couple of days, either from the Coalition, or Stephen Alquist's fine publication, has come to understand that the Rhode Island Democratic Party is again undergoing turmoil. At this point in time, it seems like, well, the salons, the leaders, the hierarchy, the patriarchy of the Rhode Island Democratic Party seems hellishly intent on some type of way to preclude, to disenfranchise, to hide, and I'll use the word silence, and that was a word more than one activist has said to me in the last day or two, the folks who are actively involved in the grassroots of the Democratic movement here in the state, and the people who are looking, well, to move it from that old school, smoke-filled room, hierarchical, patriarchal, cronyist playbook into a party that reflects really the needs of working people in the state. I'm not a Democrat, and I'm not here to endorse or to challenge, but clearly, when you've got the concerted efforts of a state party leadership to significantly disenfranchise a grassroots organization that is largely responsible for the growth of the party in the last couple of years and largely represents the future, well, that needs to be discussed. And it speaks to, unfortunately, the challenges of the state at large. And we're going to challenge that tonight. We've got a couple people who are coming in. Folks from the Women's Caucus, Maura Walsh is going to be calling in. And let's have a conversation. Paul, I'll see you soon.
Pat, thank you.
We're going to take a quick break right now. We're going to get right back to it in just a moment or two. My name is Pat Ford. I'm your host. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us. We'll be right back.